Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Enviro-Art Gallery Showcases week-long speaker series. Today, we will be hearing from Miguel Rojas Sotelo, a professor here at Duke University. Miguel Rojas Sotelo works at the intersection of ethnic, indigenous studies, environmental and health humanities, critical human geography, and border cultural theory. As a scholar, filmmaker, and visual artist, he studies how indigenous, settled or displaced, and natural spaces are shaped by modernity and how they mobilize to adapt and resist. He is particularly interested in how indigenous communities articulate their archival knowledge, racial and class politics, the spatiality of those processes, and how they are manifest in the landscape via visual, audio-visual, oral, and textual narratives. We'll also note that he has founded the Watertowns Film Festival, which is focusing on relationships between the environment through documentary studies this year, through documentaries in China and Latin America. We're partnering with them this year. So happy to introduce Miguel Rojas Sotelo.
Thank you so much, Cameron, and everybody for inviting me to this early morning, Monday morning talk. We'll be recording it and then sharing it online. Let me just start by saying that in his seminal work on environmental memory, Lawrence Boel stated the possibility that literature and other expressive media, the arts, might act as a career for environmental memory over and against the inertial force of what the environmental psychologist Peter Kahn defines as environmental generational amnesia. This idea of Kahn says, and I quote, that each generation perceives the environment into which it is born, no matter how developed, urbanized, or polluted, as the norm, and end quote. He affirms that each generation comes to think of as nature is something relative based on what is this person or group exposed to. He argues that more frequent and meaningful interactions with nature can enhance our connection to and definition of the natural world. Environmental memory then refers to our conscious and unconscious inhabitation on the planet and thereby to the viability of Earth's environmental future. On the same line of thought, Alfred Goels, a famous anthropologist, in his book, now it's a very important book on anthropology and nature, titled Art and Agency, an Anthropological Theory, defines art as, and I quote, the outcome and or the instrument of social agency, end quote. But before to start, I wanted to take a moment to thank the elders of the land each of us are standing on. I always think about them that precede us and allow us to speak. And I also thank you for being here this morning. Oír, río. If you see the word oír mirrors the word río, to listen or to laugh will be the direct translation in Spanish. In this case, I just titled it Listen River. And let's start listening to this. What we were watching and listening is a piece by the Colombian artist Clemencia Echeverri called River by Assault that works on the idea that waters have a voice, a soul, something that Gaston Bachelard argues in his book Water and Dreams. And I quote, the possibility more than any other element that water is the complete poetic reality, and I end quote, through which we enjoy, among other things, an imminent taste of our destiny. The artist, Clemencia Echeverri, traveled through the territory to enter the life of a river. Its name is the Cauca River, the second biggest river in his country, Colombia, which being especially powerful, has been also under assault by logging and a magnificent engineering works for the very ambitions to create cheap energy, electricity through a big dam, but at the same time causing a great environmental crisis there. The river defends itself, attacks, expresses itself, hides, overcomes itself. The question is, can we kill a river at last? We have done it before. This piece of art is a stunning floor-to-ceiling video installation that comprises 6 screens, respond to the concern of the fate of Colombia's rivers. Colombia is the third country with more rivers in the world. The rivers that she incorporates in this work is only one, but in many other works she incorporates rivers, evoke the horrors of the nameless war that endures so many years her country, one that still delivers mortal blows. Rivers in Colombia have been dumps for the dead that have been thrown into the waters with impunity. Rivers have drowned out the cries of survivors with the roar. Rivers are as powerful as storms or earthquakes. Rivers like this, the Cauca River, which she evokes with force in this moving sequence of images, it is well known, and more when known internationally, because 10 years ago, in a small town named Ituango, a decision was taken to build a dam and a hydroelectric power plant. This dam could rise an artificial lake 7 kilometers large in length and containing millions of hectoliters of water beneath, in which villages, crops, forests will be drowned. Inhabitants of the area oppose, as well as environmentalists, because they were convinced that the problems that this will cost will overweight the benefits expected by them. There are always other alternatives, they claim, but the megalomania, however, has a big price to pay. And a few months ago, part of the construction yielded to the pressures of the waters, and almost the entire dam collapsed. The predictions of a catastrophe were fulfilled. The project is now under revision, is in a state of uncertainty. Billions of dollars have been invested, and nobody is paying for this impasse. Clemencia Echeverri has composed a work that comprises a syncopated chronicle of the Cauca River, the emergence that bowels from the earth, and the increasing impetuous growth of its flow, the capture of it by the dam, and the fury in which it broke free from its prison, the death of destruction that also it brought to its path and to its final burial by the sea. This piece is also a chronicle that can be also a song, kind of a requiem and an elegy, and of course a sober lament for nature under attack, and also a shout of protest against those who irresponsibly attack this river. This is not the only river that has been under attack. Here are a couple of images of Ituango, the Cauca River and the dam. And here we have the Three Gorges, the largest man-made dam in the world. The massive runoff into the Yangtze River has led to concerns that the Three Gorges Dam, that is 300 kilometers long, the one that we were watching or seeing is only 7 kilometers. This one is 300 kilometers long, will be overstressed beyond its capacity to withstand the inflow. The flooding of the Yangtze will have enormous effects in China and beyond, especially since the threat of the dam collapse coincides with several other domestic crises in that country. China is responsible for manufacturing almost a third of the world's products. More than half of that output happens to be in the Yangtze River Economic Basin, which in the case of a break will be flooded and not only will destroy the economy of the country, but probably 100 million people will be affected, and some around 15% of the world's manufacturing will stop. This is what we feel when we take on nature. Let me share another image. This image is an artist's render of another river. It is made of gold leaf, vegetable powder, and sands. You can say that this render, this depiction, this artistic depiction is almost like a mandala, an image of impermanence, a labor of love, with acute attention to detail. But which one is this river? Anyone can send a chat to see if you can get it. Okay, yes. Yeah, it's that river. It's the river that is in your mind. This river, actually, as a matter of fact, is the Amazon River, and is based on this image, a heavenly image taken by a satellite. In some of my walks across my experience as an artist and environmentalist, I had learned how indigenous peoples of the Amazon navigate the integrate waterways of their mother river, that could be the mother of all rivers. They do it by recitation. They transmit this knowledge every night through the storytelling. And they tell this amazing story that the Amazon is not one, but three rivers. One river is in the sky, the clouds, what we call the global climate system. The other one is the one we see and experience that is on surface, that according to the myths of many Amazonian peoples was formed when the tree of life failed and created the Amazon. And there is another river that is running under the surface, an underground river that actually, as a matter of fact, is the largest reservoir of fresh water in the planet. But it was until very recently, and thanks to a professor here at the Nicholas School of the Environment at Duke University, Paul Baker, a geologist and climatologist, a geoclimatologist, he called himself, that we now know that this underground river exists, right? But these forms of knowledge recitation, were the only able to describe even the tiniest of the tributaries of to the little creeks that fed the Amazon and all its global connections. This recitation actually is possible thanks to a plant. This plant is also called the tongue of the forest, is the coca plant. This is the leaf. The coca plant is an endemic Amazonian wonder. And the vegetable powder that was used in the rendering of this image and that we know has been misused and abused in Western societies, transforming this vegetable green powder into a white powder, cocaine, that has created a global war, is what creates the image. The water in the depiction is made out of gold leaves. Is golden, right? And it relates to another of the effects of man threatening the health of the mother river, as gold mining has also taken the Amazon as a storm. Let's see it here. Sorry. Gold mining is one of the drivers of the destruction of the Amazon rainforest in the past 2 decades. What remains is treeless land, deforested and polluted soils, sands that are the ones used in this render, in addition to toxic waters. We have another group of Duke researchers led by Professor William Penn that have been monitoring the quality of the water of the Amazon in a series of research trips that are very worrisome about the health and the state of the communities, indigenous mostly, in the Amazon basin. And we give this for granted. This ring, that actually is the ring that I'm wearing right here in my hand, is made out of gold, right? I had used it for almost 20 years now. But I didn't know that more than 50 tons of soil had to be removed, washed, processed, and then dumped back in the banks of a river in order to create this symbol of unity or love, or how we call it, of greatness in our Western society. There are so many artists right now working on rivers. I'm going to show you some of them through this talk, but I also want to invite you because through the partnership the Enviro-Art Gallery and the Water Towns we're inviting 3 of them to share their work during the month of April 2021. Both at Duke, at Durham, and Duke in Kunshan, China. They are Alejandro Meitin, Hugo Daishan, and Fernando Arias, that they work in different ways and interactions with communities and rivers. Alejandro Meitin is Argentinian, and he will present his work as a founder of something that is called Casa Rio River House. that is a space of encounters, training, and learning of creative practices that is located in the estuary of the La Plata River. Here we are seeing the basin of River La Plata in the outermost region of this immense watershed. Casa Rio River House is a space in motion. It is a place of encounter, training, or learning of creative practices that embodied environmental commitment. Casa Rio is a space from which self-organization, both by individuals and collectives, is developed as a form of liberation, is grounded in actions that are not diverse from environmentalism or social engaged art. Alejandro Maitin is an interesting figure because he's an artist, but he is also a lawyer and an environmental activist. He has involved in researching and developing collaborative artistic practices and has a number of exhibitions, residences, and publications to his credit. Here we are seeing one of them, La Tierra no resistirá, the earth is not going to make it. He's also had taught courses and given lectures in Latin America, North America, and Europe, and he is joining us for a series of workshops at DKU that will be broadcasted live to our students and faculty and staff and families and friends at Duke University too. The second of the guests that we'll have this month is this man. His name is Huo Daishan. He's a photojournalist and environmentalist. He's the winner of the Ramon Magsaysay Award, the environmental novel in East Asia. He's the founder of an organization called the Guardians of the Huai River, which advocates for the protection of the Huai River in China. Huo Daishan was a correspondent for the Chinese environmental news. And in 1998, when the Huai River was most polluted, he quit his job as a journalist and founded one of the first environmental non-profit organizations, NGOs in China, the Huai Guardian, alone. Then, together with his family, he embarked on a journey of defending the Huai River that for more than 20 years has been bringing attention to what had happened to the pollution on this watershed. Huo has used his camera and has now an archive of close to 25,000 images of the pollution of the Huai River. He has started displaying these images on the streets, calling on people to protect the Huai River. And also, not only to inform and educate the villagers, but to tell them not to drink the water or use the water in their crops. After many of his work and the visibilization and then the awards he has received, Huo has getting a number of awards and resources, and with them he had built close to 50 biological water purification devices for 50 villages in both sides of the Huai River for free. Then, as a social activist, he has traveled to Beijing several times to reflect on the seriousness of local pollution to high-level officials who at times was monitored. He was threatened by people for exposing local pollution, but he and his family never gave up, and he still heads this incredible organization. We'll have Huo Daishan joining Yuming Wang, who co-produced a film about his work, The Guardians of the Huai River, coming later this month. Our third guest is this man. His name is Fernando Arias. He is the creative director of the organization, a nonprofit called Más Arte, Más Acción, More Art, More Action. He's a Colombian artist that through video, photography, installation, and social actions explores the human condition. he will present his video piece Atrato, a river that runs through one of the most biodiverse forests on the planet, located in the Chocó Basin, and that almost creates a natural canal connecting the Caribbean and the Pacific Oceans. The green forest canopy through which it runs is dense. Its waters are rich on fish, but also on precious metals, gold. The people who used to use the river as transport or food source are either Black members of African slave descendant free communities, palenqueros, or indigenous peoples of the land. But recently, armed groups and multinationals are fighting for this land, so it is increasingly a region of displacement and violence. Más Arte, Más Acción was founded by Fernando Arias 10 years ago. They have a place to call for artistic and scientific residences in the Pacific coast of Colombia. And from there, they have been creating a number of very interesting works. We'll hear more from Fernando during his visits this month through the Enviro-Art Gallery and the Water Towns Film Festival. We'll be sharing the information as it's coming. But probably the most imbricated work on nature and on rivers that I know of is made by this man. His name is Mojage Huillu, in Spanish, Abel Rodriguez Moinane. He is one of the last of the Nonuya, a member of just 36 people's nation of the Caquetá River, an important affluent of the Amazon. Mojage, or Don Abel, is an elder, is a wise man from the Amazon who did not distinguish between what we call art and what he calls or understands as a material culture that he has been producing as well as his people for a long time. And that at times we just treat it as a second class, lowercase a, or craft. Art and life in most indigenous communities don't have a distinction. They don't have this concept of art. Actually, in the Nonuya traditions of Don Abel, there are ways and occasions in which drawing, let's say, or art creation takes place. Here we are seeing a yanchama. It's basically a fabric that is made out of the bark of certain trees that is used for carrying children and also decorated as a full regalia for rituals in which the yanchama becomes these kinds of depictions. Representing different beings of the forest is used also in rituals of passage and in dances telling stories of origin. This rich material culture of the Nonuya, the Huitotos, and many of the peoples of the Amazon is present also in their material culture. Here we have the valajes or woven baskets, or the benches, famous benches that also are full of graphic designs in which people seek to tell the stories, right? Some of them use colors or markings of animals, footprints, or geometric figures. However, this representation highlight some characteristics that are not intended as highly realistic representations. They don't have this idea of representing reality as reality. Actually, las llamadas and other objects use vegetable dyes that are extracted by soils or clays, the, because they are basically situated, they are contextual. They have a way of telling a particular part of a story or a sense of being in that location. Paper has become to be used in the forest, in some schools, and of course for interactions with the state actors. All kinds of papers and files have begun to be part of the daily life of indigenous organizations and family. However, paper has a short lifespan in the tropical rainforest climates, since moisture, fungi, and insects attack and destroy this material in a very short time. Then there is not real tradition of using this material in producing communication or creating what we call the archive. Most of the archive happens of people telling stories, sitting here in these benches at night in the Moluccas, under the stars, sharing their stories. But in the case of Don Abel, that came to the city at the age of 60 after being displaced from his territory as a result of security issues. He approached a nonprofit organization called Tropenbos that works for the governance of tropical forests worldwide. He was looking for financial support. He is well known, even before coming to the city, as the notary of plants because of his incredible knowledge of Amazonian plants and trees and fauna too. But he was unwilling to write, since writing is not his preferred medium of expression. Then it was suggested that he explore design baskets or traps, and he did for a while. And then they suggested him to start drawing, probably that could become a good way for him to express what he knew. And he showed a great skill. Drawing first vines and little plant depictions and little illustrations in which he constructed in a very particular way, as if he will be weaving a basket fiber by fiber, showing weaving through the intertwining of strokes in the drawing. The first vine that he drew showed this great knowledge and detail observation that it was obvious that what he was painting was a living being, something that was growing, that was reflecting the way a plant behaves. These early drawings that all had been done by memory seem to reflect some of what anthropologist studies suggest is called perspectivism, or is the ability to understand the world from the perspective of other beings that inhabit the world. It's like to see the world from the eyes of a fish or from the feelings of a plant or a bird. These drawings that started to reflect this detailed observation of the life force of the plants started to highlight their forms, their architecture, their ways of relation with other plants. These powers of representation led him to continue exploring this avenue of knowledge transmission through the drawings of the trees. And here we have some of the first drawings that then started to become more like scientific illustrations. He started to write to try to tell the story of each of these trees. He reached 1,500 trees in the first year in which he was doing this kind of work, creating an entire encyclopedia of Amazonian trees that were many of them not part of taxonomies in the West. And then he started even to connect these single trees with their own lifespans, how they do look in one season or the other. And then he started to put them together in series of drawings in which the relationship of these trees, palms, vines, bushes had with the river itself, the cycle of life in the Amazon. And slowly but surely, his work started to become well known, not only in the circles of scientists working on Amazonian issues, but among artists, because of the great detail and incredible capacity of depiction of these complexities. He had been invited to Documentum Castle in 2018, as well as the Carnegie International and several exhibitions in the world. He won the Prince Claus Award for Environmental Art in 2015. And he had going to become one of the most important artists of Latin America in the past 10 years. And now in his mid-70s, Don Abel keeps drawing every day, now trying to tell the stories of the relationship that trees, plants, bushes, vines have with insects, animals, mammals, fish, and with humans. This is one of his well-known works, The Tree of Life, that tells part of that story of how the Amazon River came to be. Let's move to another section of this talk. This geography that is presented to us by people like Don Abel, the forest, the jungle, it is also incorporated thanks to narration. And the narration is the result of the relationships we have between the body, the individual and social body, and the territory. The territory is then a body, and the body is a territory. The territory can be presented by oral means, by visual means, and by embodiment. And that's what many of the peoples of, indigenous peoples of the Americas, we call it Aviala, use, because that's part of their archetypal practices. They are embodied forms that are not necessarily spell or produce in the ways the Western archive is done by paper or technologies. We already know that the jungle corrodes paper and kills computers. However, the colonial visuality that erased the ability to read these forms of representation, these yanchamas, the codices, the textiles, the ceramics, the ideograms, the petroglyphs, the indigenous architecture has been long lost in translation. However, there is one very important presence still in the landscape of the Americas, and it is present in its architecture. We know all that the sun rises in the east, and the sun continues to be the main protagonist for many of the indigenous peoples of the Americas, in Chile, in Argentina, in Bolivia, in Peru, in Ecuador, in Brazil, in Venezuela and Colombia. Many of these people celebrate the solar year. They call it in Chile the Hui Siampatu or Nincanyantum, that in Mapuche means the new year or the sunrise or the new sun, or the Inti Raymi, the festival of the sun in Quechua for the Ecuadorian and Peruvian people. That is the most important celebration of the peoples of the Southern Hemisphere, as well as some of Southeast Asian cultures. The Incas in Peru worshipped Inti. Inti is sun, because they knew that the sun gave the photosynthetic power to produce food and to bring life and energy to its empire. Temples of the sun were built throughout the Inca Empire. The most important of all of them was this one in Cusco, the Coricancha Sun Temple. Here, of course, we have the Sun Temple, Coricancha, transformed by the Catholic presence after the 1500 encounter. Inti was the sun god, source of all wealth, king of heaven, plants, and the universe. In its search for El Dorado, another conqueror, Gonzalo Jimenez de Quesada, arrived at Bacata, where supposedly El Dorado existed. Bacata is located in this high plateau in the Andean, central Andean range in what is now Colombia. What we found there was a small temple of the sun made out of wood that very soon he and his comrades looted and burned. But another thing they found was large corn crops that with their golden threads moved by the light breeze in the high plateau of the savannah look like an enormous plate of gold, the true treasure. To the east of the savannah, we found the Chingasa moorland. It's called a páramo. Today is the national park Chingasa. The magic of its mountains hold the secrets and thoughts inherited by Muiscas and Guayapés, indigenous peoples that preceded the white new settlers of the territory. Currently, this moorland is a strategic water reserve for more than 15 million people. Its ecosystem is composed by high Andean and subandean forests and moors, and is the refuge of a very particular species. Here we have the Chingasa called the frailejón. The frailejón is this plant we have here that it's a plant that captures water and stores water, fixes water on the soil, and allows this moorland to become a sponge. And here we have the work of Jason Castillo, a young Colombian artist that had been working for almost already a decade on depicting the moorland, El Páramo. What he does is really interesting. In his series of still lifes made of charcoal on cotton paper, ceramics, installations, Jason Castillo not only recreates this geography of this imaginary space in which the frailejón, this little plant, is king, but also build narratives where scientific illustration and economics collide. Castillo makes direct connections and demands to the threat of extractivism in these lands. And he does a direct allusion when he does this repetition processes, right? Like drawing and drawing once and once again these plants, but also with the production of material culture and the economy. In this case, you see here two coins, right? These golden coins that have also the representation of this plant, el frailejón, are the reverse of the 100 peso coin printed by the Central Bank of Colombia. And he uses these coins in doing these kinds of installation. Here is the name Chingasa. Chingasa is composed by 6,600 coins, 100 peso coins, installed directly to the wall, writing the name of this waterland, establishing almost a sacred relationship due to its manual construction, also the location of this installation that is located towards the east, the color, golden color, and almost in a sacramental way, right? When you think about the power of images in Latin America, we think about this, the altars of the Baroque and colonial period, that most of them are facing the east, trying to replace or to mimic the idea of the sun god, to bring a new imaginary to the peoples in these processes of evangelization. Here we have the sun altar in one of the Baroque churches in Panama City. The work of Jason Castillo also remind us of another famous artist that I want to bring today, and probably I'm going to start closing the talk soon. A good friend of mine, Antonio Caro, who passed away 1 week exactly today, one of the pioneers of conceptual art in Latin America. And with this piece, Antonio Caro in 1997, with this work titled 10 Pesos San Andrés, was trying to tell the story of this little Caribbean island that is a part of Colombia, but that is in dispute with Nicaragua. That dispute that goes back to the processes of independence and the creation of the new nations after 1810, but also the fact that this island is a known place in the imaginary of the nation. The Caribbean is this place of first contact, is the place in which African slaves were brought first in the processes of creation of the plantation economies in Dominica, in Cuba, in Jamaica, and of course in San Andres too, and then move into the continent. And this piece also used the coins to create a depiction of the silhouette of the island. 10 pesos actually are very devalued money, doesn't really make any difference, and were made with very cheap metal. Then what Antonio Caro was saying when he was producing this piece was that we don't really care about this little island that faces the hurricanes every season, that is full of Afro-descendant Creole people, that we don't care because they are not white, and that we only care of this place for their wonderful beaches in the Caribbean when we can go and visit. Not even the coin is worth using this little island in its depiction. Antonio Caro is famous because of his conceptual plays with words. Here we have one of his well-known works. Actually, one of his works was in the Pop Art America exhibit at the National Museum a couple of years ago too. He passed away 1 week from today. Then here we have, again, Chingaza, that recognizes this tradition of devaluation of the peso before the dollar or the yuan now, that puts economy over nature, the representation of territories, in this case, the moorland or the Caribbean island, the devaluation of nature before the economies, right? And the offering of those spaces that to have a right to exist and that goes in opposite direction of how relational stories of the native peoples of the Americas make to them. For them, these places are sacred places. To us, are places of economic resource. For them, are places of respect, offerings, and life. For us, are spaces of extraction. I'm going now to just take you for 4 minutes through a number of other images to close, and these ones are related to coca. Why coca has been present in what we call the global war on terror, global war on drugs. That the global war on terror actually is an expression, an extension of the global war on drugs that takes also Afghanistan as part of it, but mostly the countries of South America that produce coca and transform it into cocaine. And this talks about how geographies are built out of the experiences of people that live in these territories. A body as a territory, a body as a map. In this case, the work of Livia Posada, who is also a medical doctor, and creates these powerful portraits of women, Afro-Colombian and indigenous women displaced from the Chocó Basin because it's a territory that is in constant struggle because of illegal crops, because of wood deforestation, because of oil palm, because of illicit traffic. Her portraits are counter portraits. As you can see, she's not portraying the faces, the semblance, the images of people, but in this case, the limbs that are used for escaping this conflict. And this reminds us, of course, of other exodus that are taking place or took place. In the case of the United States, the Trail of Tears, this massive policy of forced relocation of indigenous peoples that in the 1830s suffered from exposure, disease, and starvation while en route to their new designated reserves. Right, the forced removals included mostly female elders and children of the Cherokee, Muscogee, the Cree, the Seminole, the Chickasaw, and the Choctaw nations that ended, and this is what happens with destiny, in places like Oklahoma, the decades later became the heart of oil country in the US. Then another extraction took place on their new spaces. Or the work of Miguel Angel Rojas, one of the most important contemporary artists in Colombia, that started to work with ants and coca leaves back in the mid 1990s, just making comments on how this traffic happens no matter what. If the market demands coca, as the ants do, they will cross any space. It also tells the story of the ingenuity of many of these drug dealers that use any means possible to create these routes of traffic between one point and the other. But he also makes a reference of how this coca is embodied, is used, is consumed in the countries of the North, and is part of pop art, right? Just what makes today's home so different, so appealing, a direct reference to the creation of contemporary art in the Northwest. These pieces are made with cutouts of coca leaves and dollar bills, creating direct references to our history, plants, and economies, and tells the story of this large exodus that are still taking people from places to places. This is Syria. This is people moving from the countries of Central America in their exodus to the north. by sea in the North Africa towards Europe, or by land trying to reach the southern border of the US. I'm going to leave it there. If anyone wants or have a question, I will like to answer those. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much for that amazing presentation. I think let's do like a virtual round of applause here for Professor Sotelo. As mentioned, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, or you can unmute yourselves. But we do have one question from Elaine Tutman referring to El Dorado. Were the corn crops really the El Dorado of the indigenous people rather than the gold ore sought by the Europeans?
Yes, actually, in the talk that continues, I will talk about this piece called corn, maize. That is actually the wealth of the indigenous from Mesoamerica all the way to the Andean range. The corn is the sacred plant in which actually is in the Popol Vuh, right? Corn was used to create the humankind, people. And corn is a sacred plant because it's the staple of the Mesoamerican civilizations, right? The Maya, the Aztecs, and all the way to South America. Corn is at the basis of the constitution of societies, indigenous societies until the encounter. And corn was used in colonial times as a process of exchange. For example, this piece called corn, 5 tons of corn, was a direct reflection on how the Western colonizers took control over the plantations after their arrival. And they, in exchange of giving corn back to the communities, asked them for little mountains of gold, right? Then the exchange was, we give you food, you give us gold. Then for 150 years, this a process of in-depth servitude that the indigenous went through that actually disseminated many of these populations, and that also was the door to open the importation of labor through the slave trade, is part of this story, right? El tesoro, el dorado, the treasure was food, was gold, a sacred grain, the food of the gods that actually remains us to the sun, and that is by photosynthesis what the sun gives us, right? Nourishment. Could keep on talking. I mean, the work of this artist, Carlos Uribe, is very interesting because he works with foods, in this case, corn first, and then also molasses, this black sugar that is made out, create blocks for selling the sugar. And he creates constructions with that, creating this also relationship to who were brought to the Americas to tend this sugar plantations, and at the basis of modernity, right, is the plantation system in which slave labor or slaves were at the center of the production of modernity through cheap labor and the process of large exploitations of the land. He will go and move into works like this, in which rivers and oil, because of pollution through exploitation, or in this case, Colombia had also a number of cases of people attacking all pipelines and polluting waters that takes place in Colombia. But the work of other artists like Benvenuto Chavajay, I had invited him a couple of times to do works on these issues of corn as a subversive thing, right? Very interesting. But yeah, thank you for that question. I think it's very clear, the connection there of economy and food.
And Riva is asking if this artist is also the silkscreen artist, or is this a different artist?
Which one? Carlos Uribe? No, Carlos Uribe actually he's an historian and sociologist that then became artist. Nowadays, he is the director of a national museum in Colombia. A very important intellectual, but that worked for 3 decades as an installation artist. He is from not indigenous but peasant descent. Very interesting work of Carlos Uribe. The other artist is Mohage Wiyu, as an indigenous artist. Here I'm just showing some of the work of Carlos Uribe. And then I wanted to end this talk with the work of 2 indigenous young artists, women, Tirsa Shindoe, that works on living in the city as an indigenous person and bringing the knowledge of that through weaving and performance, and the work of Rosa Tisoy Tandioy, who is a photographer that works also with this issue of weaving. Here we have the corn and the issues of the power of creation through the woman's wound, connected to the work of other artists. And now her recent work, she just moved to the country, and she just is planting. That soil is the only created force for some of these artists. Soil is the health of the soil is what gives us life. And her last works have been just expressions of her work in the land, planting medicinal plants, herbs, and also producing colors and perfumes and things with also herbs and minerals from the soil. That is connected also to the work of indigenous peoples, right? They do plant, they don't only take from the forest, and other relationships that exist within that. There's a very rich tradition right now of artists working situated and in context. And we can call them environmental artists, probably not. They are just artists that work in situation and in context with their surroundings, and in a more direct dialogue with what can be considered nature. And my final comment to close probably this talk, it's related to this idea of how we experience nature, right? To come to the beginning. As Ken argues, art can help on the experience and, for instance, the expansion of our understanding of nature. He argues that one solution is to provide opportunities for children and adults for encounters with big nature. By big, Professor Ken means wild in the most traditional sense of wild versus domestic nature. But big nature, he conceived is also relative. To a child in a city, playing in a fountain is an experience with a natural element. Kant said that he tries to be realistic about how and where people live, and how this issue of environmental justice, access to green space, ways of interacting with nature can mean accessing what is available, while aspiring to what is or what is not. Interacting with nature makes difference in how people view and move in the world. When this is a right of access, and when it is truncated, arts and the arts come with imagination. then let's listen, let's watch, let's feel, let's embody what once was, what can be, and if we allow what it can be again. And thank you so much.
Thank you for that. And I think that's a really beautiful way to close out this sort of touching on how art and how creative media can engage people in these topics. So thank you for bringing this perspective, and thank you for highlighting the relationship between this cultural and historical art pieces and Indigenous perspectives and experiences. I think that's an important touch point that the gallery could have expanded on more, that we can always expand on more. So hopefully you all enjoyed the presentation. I know we're at 11:10 here. So what we're going to do is we're going to put the recording, we're going to make the recording available. We would love to make your slides available as well, Professor, if that's okay.
Sure.
Awesome. And otherwise, please enjoy the rest of the speaker series this week. We hope you enjoyed Professor Sotelo here. And thank you again for joining us and sharing your work.
Thank you so much, everybody. And please keep attuned with all what is coming.